Mikey Sadowski, Vice President of Global Communications at Intrepid Travel, and Amy Skelding, Managing Partner of the UK Travel Practice at Fin Partners, talks to host Doug Simon on PR's Top Pros Top.
Mikey, let's start with you. If you can give us a quick sort of overview of the differentiator with Intrepid Travel.
Yeah, absolutely. So Intrepid Travel is one of the world's largest adventure travel companies. We run over 900 tours on all 7 continents in about 115 different countries. And there's 3 things that really stand out about our trips. So one, they're all run in the small group style. So we have an average of 10 travelers. So this isn't, your big bus hop on, hop off tour. This is really like traveling with a small group of friends, and it allows you to kind of see the city through kind of a more local and authentic lens. We also have local leaders on all of our trips as well. So you're going to be seeing the destination with someone who's from there, who has friends there, who kind of knows all the spots and hidden gems. And they're really there to kind of elevate that experience to something that you really couldn't have if you were traveling independently. And then the final one is responsible travel. So Intrepid Travel is recognized as the world's largest travel B Corp. So those are companies that meet the highest standards of social and environmental responsibility. Think, Patagonia and Ben and Jerry's. So we've really kind of been a pioneer on using travel as a force for good. And we kind of operate under this tagline of creating positive change through the joy of travel.
Yeah, and Amy, Mikey mentioned force for good, using travel that way. How do you effectively promote purpose-driven content?
Well, at Fin, we live by the rule that you have to be honest and modest. We know that transparency is key, particularly when it comes to discussing anything that's purpose-led or sustainability related. So working with a client like Intrepid over the last 8 years has been particularly dreamy from that perspective, as it's really rooted in the business's core, as Mikey says. But I suppose what's evident is that journalists are becoming more and more clued up about sustainability and purpose. That, there are environmental and climate editors and reporters cropping up everywhere. And as it becomes kind of more of literally a burning issue. And it's brilliant for brands like Intrepid, because in all honesty, when we were promoting that Intrepid had become a B Corp company in 2018, it was a really hard sell, and you had to explain what B Corp meant and why that was significant. But, it's been recertified last year and with a better rating, and it was so much easier to secure endorsement. So I think essentially, to effectively promote purpose-driven content, it's still kind of back to basics PR in terms of earning the trust of those editors that you know what you're talking about. And the reality is that, in Europe, where I'm based, there's much more legislation around greenwashing coming through, and which, as a PR industry, we have to welcome. It makes you kind of scrutinize the language more to ensure what you're saying is relevant, accurate, and stands up, because it will be picked apart.
Yeah, and that gets into authenticity, which is so important. Mikey, you'd mentioned the word local in your response to our first sort of overview about what you do. Do you have a top tip for crafting local stories? I would think that even on purpose-driven campaigns, local stories still resonate more.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a few things that we really do that we find really important. The main one is really centering local voices and perspectives in our stories. We talk a lot about us in our public relations roles as kind of sitting at this intersection between the work and the words. And for us, it's really important that we stay close to kind of the end product, which for us is obviously travel and the experience. So really understanding the local perspective on the ground, talking to our team. We have offices in 30 countries around the world. So whenever we're kind of, pitching a story about Peru or India, we're going to talk to the Peruvian team, or we're going to talk to the Indian team, and we're going to make sure that their voice is really heard. And for us, in terms of how we set up our ton of teams globally, is one of our priorities that we talk a lot about is internal journalism, and really encouraging and fostering and empowering a culture where our PR people are kind of empowered to do reporting in the internal workings of Intrepid, and really going in and getting the full detail and getting the full facts, and making sure that we're building super compelling narratives before we actually take that to journalists or taking that to editors. So for us, I guess it's really about centering local voices and really kind of exercising and employing a culture of internal journalism at Intrepid.
To Mikey's point, also, it's about not having PR fluff. So the stories come from the source as opposed to being a PR-led story. And we all know that both of those work at different times. There are things that we've done, that the impact initiatives, that actually they work as a PR story, but actually the impacts were coming from the local markets. And then we worked out which ones were a strong enough story to translate into media. So it's actually, almost turning it round a bit, and it makes it for a much more compelling kind of piece of coverage. And that's why journalists really kind of buy into the authenticity that Intrepid offers.
Amy, obviously with Intrepid, there are a lot of unique pieces to the stories that you get to tell. But are there lessons, tips, advice you can share to help organizations who maybe aren't as unique stand out from the competition, cutting through the noise? There's so much noise. What are some advice that you could give to other communicators about how they can approach standing out from the competition, both with the work they do and their messaging?
I think often it's really hard, particularly for perhaps smaller operators or, a hotel or something, to feel like what they're doing is different. But I've found that, as an agency, we work with lots of different brands. There's always a story. There's always something interesting. And where is a much more sensible place to start is, instead of talking about brand, it's talking about people, because essentially we know people buy people. So there will be someone who works in a business who's doing something incredible, or who's done something incredible in their life, that then translates into the business, that you can use them as case studies. And that's a really honest and straightforward way of pitching them. We've got great case studies across lots of, I'll use Intrepid as an example. We've got people who are pioneering female guides in Machu Picchu, that's led by Intrepid, as well as working with things that aren't owned by Intrepid, like the Black Mambas in South Africa, these incredible female rangers, that we can use all of those stories and find the interesting nugget that then gets you over the line, that gets you that editorial coverage.
That makes a lot of sense, to look at the story first rather than brand first, and then how does the brand fit as the best example within that trend or within that story. Mikey, I know one way to try and stand out is with new product introduction. So I'll start with you. When do you know it's the right time to talk about a new product introduction? Because sometimes, like, oh, it's coming a year in advance, wait, here it is. So how do you sort of schedule that out and plot the messaging so the momentum can build?
We always kind of talk a lot about the red thread, like, our kind of brand colors are red, our logo is red, and we kind of think about what is this red thread that connects all of these stories together. So we never really like to look at a story in isolation, always about how it's setting up something in the future or how it's a continuation of work in the past. But it really comes down, from a timeliness point of view, to two questions that we really use. We actually have kind of got our product teams involved and engaged with it. And these two questions are why now and why Intrepid? And it really, when we have a very strong and solid answer to both of those questions, we know that we're kind of onto something good. We know where something is going to have a certain level of stickiness. And, the questions can obviously change based on the type of product or the type of launch. But it's very applicable to not only travel, but all industries. So why now is obviously, what about what's happening in the world makes this relevant right now? There's a lot of times where it's like, oh, I want to talk about this because it values me and it values our company, but it has no relevance to what a customer or consumer or news cycle or editors are kind of looking at. And when it becomes very insular, only about you, and offers no value to a reader or an editor, it's going to be very hard for that to get cut through. And then the why Intrepid, or why insert brand here, is obviously, why are you uniquely placed to either solve this problem, or why is your product, the best option for this kind of, moment? So, when we really kind of look, oh, why now? This is great. There's lots of, narratives around this, or there's a lot of appetite to talk about this topic. Great. Oh, and why Intrepid? This product is super cool, super unique. It's very new and exciting. So when we can answer those questions, we usually know that we've crafted a great product at a perfect time.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you've got red hats as part of the Intrepid wardrobe, because I hear they're pretty popular in the US. But Amy, if we get to you about the timing of launch and product development, how do you approach that? And is there a role for PR to provide guidance to what the new product will actually be?
We've had a few product launches over the years, but we've had to we've had to be quite kind of delicate in terms of timing, just knowing that, you know, there's a news cycle for many. So you get your what's hot list, particularly in the UK, of what's, you know, where you're going to go this year. And actually with Intrepid, we do a not hot list to try and kind of steer away from the kind of over tourism conversations and things like that. And actually timing is critical when you're talking about new product. So, you know, you're not going to, if you launch it in March, you're dead, because there's no one's going to cover that story because they're too busy covering International Women's Day, and then the summer's coming and everyone goes mad. So you kind of start planning it. You know, we're looking at launching the not hot list in September. It's being written now, ready for a kind of, essentially it will be for a January 25 big splash. So it's kind of plotting so far in advance, as well as some of them are particularly timely. You know, Mikey just did a really incredible expedition to Pakistan, and working backwards from when launch would be, you know, seasonality and when people are actually going to book, and what works in the news cycle. So it's working backwards from when you actually think what success could look like and what the coverage will look like is the key.
PR really has a big seat at the table when it comes to decision making, and there's a lot of organizations that will kind of treat PR as more of a distribution center versus a, you know, consultant or a strategist. And I think that's a really important dynamic to kind of get right as an organization, because, you know, when you kind of treat PR as kind of the end state, and then it's like, okay, well, we've made the decision and this has all happened, get it out into the world now. There's a lot of backtracking, like, oh, well, the timing isn't right, or this actually isn't going to work very well, or actually this is very like completely the opposite of what is being really well received out there in the media landscape. So I think for organizations that are kind of, you know, thinking and grappling with kind of how to be more effective in terms of their PR and comm strategy, I would also just consider the seat that you're giving PR at the table, and whether they're kind of brought into those decisions right from the beginning, which will help just craft a much more complete initiative, a much more complete plan, and ensure from end to end it's a much kind of more successful campaign.
Amy, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
PR actually gets to see across the entire business, because often people sit in their pots of kind of revenue, sales, marketing, product. And actually, because you see across everything, you can actually, in whatever business it is, you can see where the pinch points will be. And when you're thinking about responsible tourism, that's a really interesting one, because you can ask the questions that perhaps aren't being asked within everyone's little silo. So, you know, why would anyone want to buy from us? Why would anyone want to work for us? Why would anyone want to invest in us? You know, why would anyone allow us to work in their community? And I don't think that's always being asked across every part of everybody's business or tourist board or hotel group. And you can ask those questions so that then you can actually create an answer that makes sense.
Well, the two of you have been really clear and helpful with the information you provided. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.